Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. So, I thought ranking Neil Young's 43 albums would be kind of a difficult task. It's nothing compared to making sense and trying to explain all of the archives here. But we're going to do it because there's some incredibly important and great material in all of this archives. I always say the gift that keeps on giving. Neil Young has seems to be his mission to everything he ever touched or did, he's going to put out there. And so much of it is great. It really is. So, a couple of things I want to cover here because in the previous videos I also wasn't able to, get into the regular live albums and the compilations. The compilations honestly with Neil Young other than one aren't that important, but I want to at least mention them. So, this is, I'm hoping, the final video in this Neil Young series. If you haven't watched the other three, go back. The first one I review, Chrome Dreams, the latest release in the archives. Kind of give an intro to the whole Neil Young thing. Talk a little bit about the Stills Young Band as well. And then the next two episodes, we rank worst to best. 43 of Neil Young's albums, and then here is the archives. But first, let's talk about live Neil Young, because actually, live albums with Neil Young are really important. So technically, his first live album is "Time Fades Away," right? But this was covered in the ranking because on this album he's releasing new material. It just happens to be in the live setting. So myself and a lot of other people kind of view this more with his, you know, studio releases, even though it is technically live. So his first like real live album, I mean, in the traditional sense, where he's playing a lot of earlier songs that had been released from the studio, would be Live Rust, 1979, the companion piece to Rust Never Sleeps. I have talked about this record in multiple videos. It is just one of the foundational records for me personally. I mean, I learned how to play guitar off of this record. And I've also mentioned it. I think it's one of the perfect or one of the best introductions to Neil Young if you're trying to get into this. Uh, Double album. First record's acoustic mostly. Second record is just blazing crazy horse tunes. So I think it shows his two, I think, most important musical personas contained in here. This is 5-star record. This is essential. All right, real quick. I think the rest of these live albums I have on CD. So again, we're just gonna go through the official live releases first, and then we'll hit the archives. You actually got to get to the early '90s with Weld before the next real official live record. And this was on the heels of Ragged Glory, and so he was kind of riding this great resurgence in the early '90s. Pretty cool there. This is there it is in color. I mean, this is awesome. I mean, this was actually pretty huge at the time. I mean, it's got some just killer versions of Cortez the Killer, Powderfinger, a lot of stuff you'd expect, and then some of the material off of the then current Ragged Glory. Got a real great Crime in the City there from the Blue Notes days. At least that song is. Now, notoriously, this was accompanied by a third disc and some limited editions called Arc. I don't have a copy of Arc, and I can throw it up there. It's basically riffs and distortion and kind of a sound collage. I mean, maybe akin to Lou Reed's Metal Machine music, if that gives you any idea. Now, after Harvest Moon, he's kind of riding high on that in the mid '90s. He put out this Unplugged, for MTV Unplugged, and it's got some interesting stuff. An acoustic version of Mr. Soul, String Man, which is one of those great gems, from the vaults. That this is the first time he put it out officially, although it's now, of course, on Chrome Dreams as well. the pipe organ version of Like a Hurricane, which is cool. Some real nice versions of like Harvest Moon and some stuff off of that. Transformer Man, well, the electronic songs off of Trans he does on this acoustic version. Shows you how solid those songs were. A little bit later, kind of wrapping up the decade, another double live Crazy Horse record, Year of the Horse. Not quite as great as Weld was, but there's some interesting stuff on there. It's a great line he delivers in here where he says, "They all sound the same," talking about the Crazy Horse songs. A little bit of self-awareness there. And that brings to mind Neil Young live. You listen to a lot of this live archive stuff, live records, or see him live. He is funny as hell. I mean, he has got this dry wit, and it's just the banter with the audience is often quite entertaining. The year 2000, we've got Road Rock Volume 1. There is no Volume 2. Interesting band, kind of a mix. Got Jim Keltner there on drums, and his wife at the time, Peggy Young, on some backing vocals. Ben Keith is on there. Yeah, it's just an interesting mix. It's a pretty awesome 18-minute version of Cowgirl in the Sand. I've got this on DVD too, and you can see it's rain. It's like, I think it's Red Rock, maybe up in Colorado, but see the rain. It's just a pretty awesome version of that. That's the highlight. The rest of this, yeah. You've got The Times. This is kind of cool. It's a little EP he recorded on his porch during the lockdown, during COVID. Neil kind of checking in at the time. It's kind of interesting little live acoustic EP, mixing some old like Ohio and Campaigner with some newer like Looking for a Leader. And, interesting stuff. And then there's also Earth, which I know I own. Can't find the damn thing, so editor can throw it up there. Earth is a live album with Promise of the Real. I don't think it's all that interesting. Although I don't know, it's kind of thematic because he tries to bring a lot of songs that are somewhat related to the earth and his environmental concerns. So it's somewhat thematic. Even has some like forest sounds in between the songs. It's kind of interesting. Most recent one, Noise and Flowers, also with Promise of the Real. It's kind of fun. It's a lot of older stuff. Mr. Soul, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. Mostly older stuff. And you got On the Beach is on here. And you got Rockin' in the Free World, some later stuff. But again, Promise of the Real, great band. And I talked about that band in the countdown, but really good. Okay. I think that's all the live stuff, I think. Official live stuff. Let's get to the archives. So the archives start with this, with Decade. And, so this was a comp that Neil Young put together. It was released in 1976, and it's just like what it sounds. It's a 3-record set. Love that album art, by the way. Great album art. 3-record set that covers his first decade of music, 1966 to 77 or 76. This is it's a must, even if you own I don't know. There's something magical about Decade, I think. When it was released at the time, it was full of rarities, unreleased stuff. Most of the stuff has been available since then on other things, archives and such, but it was really kind of a revelation when it came out. And so Neil decided he was going to just basically make a Decade 2. And that sort of evolved over time and became this massive archives set. Now, something funny, Neil's been releasing these releases at a rapid pace lately, and so Neil, he said he has I was reading this interview, and he said he has this uncle who's really old and still alive, and said he really wanted to hear all the stuff that Neil had in the vaults. So because of his uncle, Neil's like rapidly releasing all of whatever. Thank you, Neil Young's uncle. The gift that keeps on giving is this archive set. How do we unravel this thing? Well, let's start with the big sets. So, there are 2 large sets. Here's the first. It hadn't been released on vinyl, but you open it up. There are 10 CDs in there. And this covers 1963 to 72. And then volume 2, which is here, another 10 CDs, covers 72 to 76. Supposedly next year, 76 through the 80s is coming out, and he's got plans for the 90s and beyond. Okay. And, some things about these are frustrating because I'm going to show you the individual releases. He releases these archive stuff all the time. And then sometimes he'll put some of them in these boxes, so you like buying them twice. But these are worth it. If you're a Neil fanatic, you must have these. I mean, because he has so much like these outtakes, and some of these outtakes are just like songs you've never heard anywhere else, especially archives too. This one, like Home Fires, which is one of his great, still kind of lost 70s songs, hadn't been put out yet, not even on an individual archives release. It's on here. Traces is on here, which is another one of those. He's got some great stills, young band material on here. It's just, and so he'll organize, like this disc here, or Doom, Dume, which is basically the Zuma sessions. And Ride My Llama, a Crazy Horse version of that. This song called Born to Run, which never appeared anywhere. It's not the Springsteen song, but it's cool. Kansas is on here. Hawaii is on here. The Too Far Gone, that was from these original sessions. And then a lot of the song. And then these archives also feature great kind of remastered, sort of definitive versions of the key songs too. And so, these are just essential stuff, really. All right. Now, he's divided these archives releases into different types of releases. There's the performance series, which are basically live albums. So I'm going to show you those. There these, I got my notes here, the bootleg series, which are also live, but often kind of sound like bootlegs, but he's putting them out anyway. There's the, where is it? The like a special release series, right? Which so far 4 of those. Those are the real gems. Chrome Dreams is one of those. Those are those unreleased albums. These records that he had put together that he shelved, and there's just some amazing stuff with that. So let's get into it. The performance releases. We'll start with those. I'm not gonna show you in order of release that he's put out. I'm gonna show them chronological order of when they were recorded. All right. So we start with Canterbury House, which is 1968, a solo acoustic show with a lot of kind of rapping with the audience and really funny stuff. And then very soon after that, Live at the Riverboat from 1969, also solo acoustic. You're going to see there's a lot of these solo acoustic releases out here. Then there's this, which, on its surface would seem like a total gem, which is Crazy Horse at the Fillmore, 1970. Now, this is the original Crazy Horse, so finally a live recording of Crazy Horse with Danny Whitten, right? The only problem with this, it's not the complete show. And a lot of these others, he didn't put out the whole show. This is a one record, single record. It's just kind of the electric set. Now there's this acoustic set that he did that's which isn't on here, I believe. Or I believe he did an acoustic set that night. So what's here is cool. Winter Long is on here. Early version of Wonderin' is on here. And then some of the usual suspects. Kind of everybody knows this is Nowhere, material mainly. But yeah, just incomplete. What's here is pretty amazing, but it's incomplete. Next, we've got, let's see here, Live at the Cellar Door, another kind of acoustic one from 1970. I know I have it, I can't find it, so editor can throw it up there. But then after that, from 1970 also, Live at Massey Hall, double album, again, solo acoustic. Here he is starting to preview, some of the, actually some of the Harvest material. This is a real gem, 5-star record and essential. If you're kind of getting lost in all these acoustic albums that he's putting out, I think in the archives, out of all these like live acoustic albums, this is the one. I mean, this is the one to get. Live at Massey Hall. It's just stunning sound for 1970, almost a perfect set list. Some hard to find stuff, and then all the great songs that you would expect up to that point. What was cool is Man Needs a Maid and Heart of Gold, very early versions of that, where he's kind of presenting them kind of for the first time, is cool. Then, of course, Neil, he puts out a show from 3 nights later entitled Young Shakespeare, which is kind of interesting because it's a single record, so it's kind of a shorter, almost like a kind of a shorter version of Massey Hall. But I just get Massey Hall, and again, really funny banter with the audience between songs. What is next? Tuscaloosa from 1973. This is from the same tour as Time Fades Away. And for a long time, Neil had been promising he was going to put out this sort of revised Time Fades Away, this new version. And he has since come out and said, well, this is as close as you're going to get to Time Fades Away 2. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. It's got some, it's kind of stuff from, Harvest and from After the Gold Rush on there. But great versions, but also has Time Fades Away, has Don't Be Denied. So some of those songs from Time Fades Away. So that is pretty great. Then you've got, now I've featured this one, Tonight's the Night live with Roxy. If you go back, we did an episode where I kind of deep dive into Tonight's the Night and kind of talked about this. This is where he basically kind of previews and plays the whole Tonight's the Night record, live in this club. It's this kind of wonderfully sloppy, drunken, really awesome though show. But again, I talk a lot more about that in that Tonight's the Night episode. Coming up next, now this one, so far, this is at Odeon Budokan from 1976 with Crazy Horse. Again, not the whole show, so you kind of wish he had put the whole thing out. Now, this one so far has only been available on CD in the big Volume 2 box set. From what I read, he's putting out a vinyl version of this next month. So there you go. Kind of a legendary show, often bootlegged. I don't know, it doesn't stand out to me though. I mean, it's good, but it's not like, like his reputation. That's just to me. Then you got this very interesting solo acoustic again. This is Songs for Judy from 1976, referring to this very strange stream of consciousness story he tells about Judy Garland. So, Songs for Judy. There's no song for Judy on here. Really interesting set list, double album, a lot of strange banter with the audience. It's fun. And 76, it's a key period, right? Moving into the 80s, this one was really good. This is called A Treasure. Now, this is with the band Touring for Old Ways, okay? And one of those cases where the tour is really much better than that album. So he's playing this kind of, but there's an edge to this, kind of a rock edge where he's mixing the rock and country that isn't there on the straight country Old Ways album. Really, there's a song called Gray Riders on here, which it wasn't on Old Ways, which is awesome. And what is it? He does this, Flying on the Ground is Wrong, like reaching way back, which is cool. Very similar deal here with Blue Note Cafe, another 2-record set featuring the tour with the Blue Notes, right, from 1988. This Note's for You and all that. And again, great. I think the live version of that band is better than what was on the record. And it's cool kind of doing the Blue Note treatment for something like On the Way Home, and just a killer version of Crime in the City, which was, going to appear on Freedom, of course. Yeah, a great, I think, sort of revisiting that period and appreciating a little bit more. Next, we got 1990, Way Down in the Rust Bucket. So very similar to the Weld thing, but earlier in that tour. And this is like in a club where they're kind of warming up. And kind of, whereas Weld had sort of a standard set list, this one's a little more interesting. Surfer Joe and Mo the Sleaze is on here, which is interesting. Homegrown's on here. T-Bone is on here. So kind of some fun stuff. What else we got here? Let's see. Dreamin' Man Live from 92. Basically solo acoustic version of the Harvest Moon album. I honestly prefer the Harvest Moon arrangements. I kind of like, the instrumentation that was added there. Then finally is Return to Greendale, which is Greendale Live. Yeah, you saw where that ranked on my ranking. I'm not a big fan of it, so on that one. All right, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about the Bootleg series, which is more live stuff, for the archives, but a little rougher. You've got Carnegie Hall in 1970, which actually doesn't sound rough. It's a beautiful sound on there. Double album. You've noticed probably that he has released a lot from 70, 71. Even for a diehard like me, some of this stuff kind of does overlap a little bit. Yeah, you kind of wish that he would maybe delve into some other eras a little bit more. Now he released in on one day he released 3 albums from this from the Bootleg series. I'm Happy That Y'all Came Down, which is 71, solo acoustic. Royce Hall from 71. And then Citizen Kane Junior Blues, which is 1974. This one is much rougher sounding. I mean, like, I think it was recorded with just someone just had a little recorder on their table in this little club. But it's kind of a fascinating thing. Neil's real loose, pushed it over the end. Long May You Run, Ambulance Blues, Revolution Blues, On the Beach, Motion Pictures, some stuff, less standard stuff. It's kind of an interesting thing. What else on the Bootleg releases? Then you've got this one. Oh, Somewhere Under the Rainbow. I got this on vinyl. This one, I think I did a review of this, if I'm not mistaken. So you maybe go watch that. This is also, kind of from that Tonight's the Night era, and it sounds muffled. It sounds like a bootleg, but man, there's an edge to this that is pretty awesome. I mean, really is. So if you're kind of into that, one other one. No, I think that's it. Maybe I'm missing one. I'm not sure, but anyway, I think that's it. Let's talk about these special releases here out of this archives. These are the killer ones. These are, if I had included these in the rankings, I think one of them would have been, in the middle area, but 3 of these would have been pretty high in the rankings. So again, we'll go chronologically of when the sessions were. Homegrown, a long desired, lost album he finally put out. This was recorded in 1975, kind of amidst his breakup with Carrie Snodgrass, right? His first or second wife, his wife at the time, the actress. He pulled it because one of the reasons he thought it was kind of too personal. Yeah, and then they decided to put Tonight's the Night out instead in 75, which, that's kind of harrowing. But yeah, this was cool when this came out because this had Separate Ways, Try, Mexico, I believe, Florida, which is really weird and out there. It's like this trippy stream of consciousness spoken. Strange. Kansas, we don't smoke it no more. A vacancy. Like a lot of these songs really hadn't been heard, and it was kind of a revelation for a lot of people. I think it's good. I don't think it's like amazing, but I think it's very good, and it would have fit real nicely in that '70s run. I like White Line on there, which later showed up, I think, on Ragged Glory. Um, it's a nice acoustic version, actually, with Robbie Robertson playing guitar with him, which is kind of cool. Then there's this one, 1976, Hitchhiker. Solo acoustic session in one kind of, he was supposedly a bit drunk and high and everything else, and it was just him and David Briggs. And but whatever, this is one of my favorite Neil Young albums. It's a 5-star record. If I had put this in the ranking, this would be in my top 10 Neil Young records. I mean, there's just something about it. Pocahontas, Powderfinger, Give Me Strength, just out of nowhere. It's this beautiful 70s song that just didn't show up anywhere else, but here it is. Hitchhiker, it's a great song, which of course a later version, shows up on Linois, which I talked about in the ranking, but this is where it would have been. Hitchhiker is great. Human Highways on here, Campaigner. This is just, I don't know. There's something about this one that just really hits me. 5-star record, essential. And then the last one on this, these special release ones is the one that we started this series with a while back reviewing, 1977's Chrome Dreams. So you want to hear me talk about that? Go watch the first video in this series. Okay. All right. Wow. Doing all right. Time wise. Oh, you know what? Forgot Toast. I just have this on CD. But Toast. This is the last one in that. So this was 2001. This is jumping with Crazy Horse. This is jumping ahead a bit. This is one of those records that he finished and then pulled, and then he put out Are You Passionate? And this is actually much better than Are You Passionate? It's interesting. I think similar with Homegrown. Supposedly he was having some marital issues and kind of depressed, and it's just, I guess this stuff gave him bad vibes, and it was too close, too personal, so he pulled it. But I guess he feels better about it, releasing it way later, and it's good. It's like a solid record of that era. It's not going to blow you, at least for me. It doesn't blow me away, but it's like it's better than Are You Passionate? If he had put this out instead of Are You Passionate, it was better than that. Okay, there we go. I've got a bunch of Neil Young bootlegs. I just want to show you 3. We could really get lost in the weeds if I'm pulling out all these bootlegs, but I just want to show you 3 that I think are the best ones I have. And let's see. Again, we'll go in chronological order. This is the one of the acetates of Tonight's the Night, and so it's a little bit different than what came out on Tonight's the Night. And again, in that deep dive video on Tonight's the Night, I talk a little bit about this too. So, yeah, so it's got a lot of the Tonight's the Night stuff on, but not all of it. That ended up on there. Like Come On Baby, Let's Go Downtown isn't on there. Borrowed Tune, which is actually one of my favorite songs on there, is not on there. But added to that's not on the original Tonight's the Night, is Walk On, For the Turnstiles, Bad Fog of Loneliness, Winter Long, and Traces. Actually, I stand corrected. Borrowed Tune is on here. Yeah. But there's a few other, I don't know. Go to that other Tonight's the Night video and we can compare what's on or not on there. This is awesome. This is from 1986. Yeah. This would have been the Landing on Water tour with Crazy Horse. And it's just rocks and is brutal. Now, I have seen written that Neil Young is planning on putting this out as an archives release, which would be awesome because it is great. It even does some trans stuff. He does Sample and Hold and Computer Age, but then Heart of Gold and Cinnamon Girl, kind of all over the place. newer and older stuff, and it's just there's something about this one really rocks. Like I said, he's planning on putting this out. There's even an introduction, I believe, from Sam Kinison, the comedian. Right? There's a name from the past. And then the other bootleg I want to show you is Paris 1989. The 88, 89 shows, there's really something special about that. I'm hoping he puts something out like from the Freedom Tour, or even before he put Freedom out, he was doing some of this. Now, this is solo acoustic, and it is just awesome. You know, he's got This Note's for You on there, and No More from, and Rockin' in the Free World. And he does this Ohio, and don't let it bring you down. This is just so good. Yeah, I really want him to put out some of that 89, that Freedom era, you know, when he was playing that music even before the record came out. That's the first time I ever saw Neil Young, actually. And that was a brutally great show. It just one of my top 3 shows in my life. It's so amazing. Some interesting stories with that. I will save that story for, I'm going to do like a top 10 concerts I've ever seen video at some point. I talk about that show, or I will. Okay, real quick, compilations. There's not much there. It's only 3 of them, really. And I showed you Decade. That's really the most important one. But 2 more real quick. There is Lucky 13, which perversely, so it was so great. This is such a great idea. It's like this focuses on his 80s material. So you might think, wow, okay, finally we can get maybe kind of the best songs off of some of those crazy weird albums and get like this sort of definitive, sort of like great compilation, like really, like what was Neil really doing in the 80s? Half of the stuff on here is like unreleased stuff from the 80s. So it turns out not to be this definitive comp at all. But then there is some songs from the 80s records, but some of them aren't the best. Some of them are great. Hippie Dream and Mideast Vacation are on there. I love those 2. You got a live version of This Note's for You, which is cool. But yeah, it's just like, you know, it would be so great and make so much sense to put out some definitive comp of like, okay, here's kind of the 80s in a capsule for Neil, and this doesn't do it, although it's kind of an interesting listen. And then he did put out a greatest hits, which it's just I don't know. I don't know who this is for. I guess the casual fan, but it's yeah, it's the greatest hits inclusion based on original record sales, airplay, and known download history, and it's strictly chronological for when the songs were recorded. So you know what the first 2 songs are? Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand, back to back, 2 like 10-minute Crazy Horse songs, which are classics, of course. But so you're gonna hit somebody. I mean, who is this for? The casual fan. So you're gonna hit somebody with 20 minutes of these Crazy Horse jams. You know, I mean, you know, the vast majority of this stuff is from the 70s. There's only 2 songs on here that aren't from the 70s, which is "Rockin' in the Free World" and "Harvest Moon." So I don't know. I'm so deep into Neil that this is fairly meaningless to me, but maybe it's good for somebody. I don't know. All right, that's it, guys. I think I did that in pretty good time. I think we're done with Neil Young for a little while. You know, unless he releases something next week and I got to review it. But other than that, I think we're done. So, in the comments, I guess let's talk archives or live Neil or whatever. What do you guys got? What do you guys think? Anyway, I do hope that you guys have enjoyed this Neil Young extravaganza. He is my favorite artist. I've been wanting to hit him for a long time. I appreciate your patience. If Neil isn't your favorite, we've been hitting you with these episodes. I promise you, the next episode will be free of anything Neil Young. I think, yeah, it should be. Okay, so we're gonna move on to some other stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please hit the bell for notifications, subscribe, like the videos. You know all the drill. And we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.